This was the first time I saw it work. Just a tiny spark, but it meant life. We didn't know how far it would go, but we knew it had to start somewhere.
Chapter 1. The Rhythm of Winter. The winter of 1,958 inches, Clarence, New York, did not fall gently. It arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The snow didn't drift, it piled, turning the small town into a labyrinth of white trenches. For Elias Thorne, a 24-year-old mechanic with grease permanently etched into his fingerprints, the cold was an enemy. It seized the joints of the old Fords he repaired and, more terrifyingly, it seemed to seize the heart of the woman he loved. Clara Vance was 22, a seamstress with eyes the color of polished walnut and a spirit that defied the frailty of her body. They were to be married in June, a date that felt less like a promise and more like a gamble with every passing day. "Stop staring at me, Eli," Clara whispered, her voice thin as parchment. She was sitting in the armchair of her parents' drafty living room, wrapped in 3 wool blankets. Her lips had a faint, terrifying tint of blue. "I'm not staring," Elias lied, wiping his hands on a rag. "I'm admiring the upholstery." "You're counting," she accused gently. "You're counting the seconds between my breaths." He didn't deny it. He lived his life by the rhythm of engines, the steady times, thrum, thrum, thrum times of a healthy V8. But Clara's heart was a broken engine. It suffered from a complete heart block. The electrical signals that told her heart to beat simply didn't arrive on time. Sometimes she would faint mid-sentence, her body crumpling like a marionette with cut strings, only to wake up moments later, confused and terrified. This was Stokes-Adams syndrome, a specter that haunted their engagement. In the kitchen, Clara's mother, Mrs. Vance, was weeping quietly. The sound was a low hum, a background radiation of grief that pervaded the house. Her father, a proud man who had lost his job at the steel mill 2 months prior, sat at the table staring at an empty ledger. Poverty was not a lack of money, it was a lack of options. "The doctor said the pills aren't working," Mr. Vance said, his voice hollow as Elias entered the kitchen. He said we should make her comfortable." "Dr. Calloway is a fool," Elias snapped, the fear making him aggressive. "There has to be something else. The University Hospital in Buffalo. They're doing things there." "With what money, boy?" Mr. Vance slammed the ledger shut. "We can't even afford the coal to keep this house warm. The rich get miracles. We get comfortable." Elias looked out the frosted window. Somewhere in the distance, toward the barn behind his own modest home, a man named Wilson Greatbatch was tinkering. Elias had fixed Wilson's car once, a humble vehicle for a man with such grand ideas. Wilson was an engineer, not a doctor, but he spoke of electricity and the body in the same breath. "I'm going to Buffalo," Elias said, buttoning his coat. "I'm going to find a way. Accidents happen, Mr. Vance. Sometimes good ones." Chapter 2. The Barn of Impossible Things. Wilson Greatbatch was a man possessed. His workspace was not a sterile laboratory but a converted barn behind his house, heated by a wood stove and the sheer intensity of his focus. The air smelled of solder, ozone, and damp wood. It was late. The rest of the world was asleep, but Wilson was hunched over a workbench cluttered with transistors, resistors, and a soldering iron that hissed like a snake. He was trying to build an oscillator to record heart sounds, a diagnostic tool. He reached into a box of resistors. He needed a 10,000 ohm resistor to complete the circuit. His hand fumbled, fingers numb from the cold that leaked through the barn walls. He pulled one out, squinting at the color bands in the dim light. Brown, black, yellow. He soldered it in. Click, pulse, silence. Click, pulse, silence. Wilson froze. The circuit wasn't simply recording sound, it was pulsing. Specifically, it was pulsing at 1.8 milliseconds, then cutting off for a second. It was a rhythm. Lub-dub, lub-dub. He stared at the breadboard. He had grabbed the wrong resistor. He had installed a 1 megohm resistor instead of the 10,000 ohm one. A mistake. An accident. "My God," Wilson whispered, to the empty barn. He wasn't looking at a recorder anymore. He was looking at a metronome. If he could shrink this, if he could power it, it could drive a heart. The door to the barn creaked open, letting in a swirl of snow. Elias stood there, shivering, his cap in his hand. "Mr. Greatbatch?" Elias asked. I fixed your radiator last month. You said if I ever needed a favor." Wilson looked up, his eyes wide behind his glasses, still seeing the pulsing circuit. "The mechanic. Elias, isn't it?" "It's my girl, sir, Clara. Her heart. It stops. The doctors in town say it's hopeless. But I heard you talk about electronics and medicine. Is there a machine?" Wilson looked down at the accidental circuit. The fun in accidents was that they revealed the truth the universe was hiding. "Not yet, Elias," Wilson said, his voice trembling with a sudden, massive responsibility. "But I think I just invented the start of one." Chapter 3. The Cold Reality of Buffalo General. The journey to Buffalo General Hospital was a study in contrasts. The Vance's rusted sedan rattled over the potholes, while sleek Cadillacs glided past them, carrying the wives of industrialists to high tea. Clara lay in the back seat, her head in Elias's lap. She was fading. The episodes were becoming more frequent. "If I die," she whispered, looking up at the stained roof of the car. "You have to marry Sarah Jenkins. She knows how to bake." "Shut up, Clara," Elias said, tears stinging his eyes. "You're going to bake your own damn pies." At the hospital, the atmosphere was chaotic. It was the era of open-heart surgery's infancy. The smell of ether and antiseptic was overwhelming. They were met by Dr. William Chardak, a surgeon with the hands of a pianist and the demeanor of a general. He was the chief of surgery at the Veterans Administration Hospital, but he consulted here. Wilson Greatbatch had called him. "This is the girl?" Chardak asked, looking at Clara's pale form on the gurney. He didn't look at her with pity, but with calculation. "Yes," Elias said. "Mr. Greatbatch said you could help." Chardak sighed, rubbing his temples. "Wilson is a genius, but he is also an optimist. The device he is talking about, it's experimental. We've only tested the concept on animals. To put an electronic device inside a human being, it's science fiction, son." "The alternative is a funeral," Mr. Vance said, his voice cracking. A nurse, a stern woman named Mrs. Gable, stepped forward. "Doctor, her pulse is 30. She's going into another block." Chardak looked at the monitor, then at Elias. He saw the desperation, the raw, unrefined love that defied logic. "Admit her," Chardak ordered. "Put her on the external pacemaker, the mains-powered one." The mains-powered one was a terrified beast. It was a large box plugged into the wall outlet. It was effective, but it was a tether. And if the power went out, which it often did in Buffalo winters, Clara would die. Chapter 4. The Tether. Days turned into weeks. Clara lived attached to the wall. She was a prisoner of the AC current. The machine was painful. Every shock that kept her heart beating made her chest muscles twitch violently. Elias sat by her side every evening after work. He brought her books, but she was often too tired to read. The psychological toll was immense. She wasn't living, she was existing between shocks. One evening, a storm knocked out the power in the ward. The lights flickered and died. The hum of the machine stopped. "Elias!" Clara screamed in the dark, the panic instantaneous. Elias didn't think. He lunged for the hand-crank generator kept for emergencies. It was a brutal device. "Crank it!" the nurse screamed, fumbling for a flashlight. Elias cranked. His muscles burned. He was manually beating her heart. In the darkness, he wept, turning the handle, becoming the engine he had always understood. Turn, beat, turn, beat. "I've got you," he grunted in the dark. "I won't let you stop." When the power returned 20 minutes later, Elias collapsed, his hands blistered and bloody. But Clara was alive. Dr. Chardak watched from the doorway, his face unreadable. He walked to the phone at the nurse's station and dialed a number. "Wilson," Chardak said, "how small can you make it? And how soon?" Chapter 5. The Mercury Battery. Back in the barn, Wilson Greatbatch was fighting physics. The circuit worked, but the power source was the problem. He needed a battery that wouldn't leak, wouldn't fail, and would last. He was running out of money. He had $2,000 left in savings, enough to feed his family for a year, or enough to buy components for a month. He chose the components. His wife, Eleanor, watched him with a mixture of pride and terror. She was the unsung hero, managing a household on fumes while her husband chased a miracle. "It has to be mercury," Wilson muttered, holding a small Mallory battery. It was new technology. Zinc mercury, stable voltage. He began to mold the device. He used epoxy resin to seal the components, creating a small, smooth block that could fit in the palm of a hand. It looked like a bar of soap, but inside was the rhythm of life. He worked for 3 days straight, fueled by coffee and the memory of Elias's desperate eyes. He wasn't just building a machine, he was building a future for a couple he barely knew. Chapter 6. The Rich Man's Son. While Clara fought for her life, a subplot of bitterness was brewing in the hospital. In the private wing lay Julian Thorne, no relation to Elias, though the shared name was a cruel irony. Julian was the son of a railroad tycoon. He had a minor arrhythmia, an inconvenience. Julian's father, Marcus Thorne, paced the hallway, demanding the best doctors, the best food, the best everything. He saw Elias in the cafeteria one day, eating a stale sandwich. "You're the mechanic," Marcus said, recognizing him from the garage. "My son needs his car brought around, the Jaguar." "I'm not working today," Elias said, his eyes rimmed with red. "My fiancée is dying upstairs." Marcus scoffed. "People die every day. Business continues. Here." He threw a $10 bill on the table. "Fetch the car." Elias looked at the money. It was more than he made in 2 days. He thought of the medicine Clara needed, the food her parents couldn't buy. He took the money. He hated himself, but he took it. He walked out to the parking lot, the cold biting his face, and drove the rich man's car. The engine purred perfectly. It was unfair. The machine had a perfect heart, while Clara's was failing. Perception versus reality. Marcus thought he was buying a service. Elias knew he was selling his pride to buy Clara another day. Chapter 7. The dog named Generous. Before the device could go into Clara, it had to go into a dog. It was the grim reality of medical progress. Wilson and Chardak met at the animal lab. A stray mongrel, whom the staff had ironically named Generous because he gave everything to science, was prepped. The surgery was tense. Chardak opened the chest. Wilson handed him the epoxy block. It looked alien against the organic tissue. They wired the leads to the heart. "Turning it on," Wilson said. The heart, which had been chemically slowed, suddenly snapped into a rhythm. Lub-dub, lub-dub. They watched for an hour, then 2. The dog woke up. It didn't die. It wagged its tail. Wilson slumped against the wall. "It works, Bill. It works." But a dog was not a human, and the FDA regulations of the future didn't exist yet. This was the Wild West of medicine. The decision to put this in a human was entirely on Chardak's conscience. Chapter 8. The Ultimatum. Clara was fading fast. The external pacemaker was causing burns on her chest. Infection was setting in. Dr. Chardak called Elias and Mr. and Mrs. Vance into his office. "We have a prototype," Chardak said. "It is fully implantable. No wires through the skin, no wall plugs. She would carry the battery inside her." "Is it safe?" Mrs. Vance asked, clutching her handbag. "We don't know," Chardak admitted brutally. "It has worked on a dog for 3 weeks. If the battery leaks, she dies. If the circuit fails, she dies. If the body rejects the plastic, she dies." "And if we don't do it?" Elias asked. "She has maybe 3 days," Chardak said. The silence in the room was heavy. Elias walked into Clara's room. She was awake, barely. "They want to put a machine inside me," she whispered. "Like a robot." "Like a clock," Elias corrected. "A clock that keeps perfect time." "I'm scared, Eli." "I know, but I want to marry you. I want to argue about your bad cooking. I want to see you get old and wrinkly. We have to try." Clara closed her eyes. "Okay, let's make me a clock." Chapter 9. The Surgery. May 1960. The operating theater was a gallery of tension. Medical students crowded the observation deck. This was history. Wilson Greatbatch stood in the corner, dressed in scrubs, looking like a fish out of water. He held a backup device in his pocket, clutching it like a talisman. Chardak made the incision. The room was silent save for the hiss of the ventilator. He exposed the heart. It was a quivering, unhappy muscle. He sutured the leads to the myocardium. He created a pocket in the abdomen for the pulse generator. "Connecting," Chardak announced. He connected the leads to the epoxy block. For a second, nothing happened. The heart paused. Elias, waiting in the hallway, felt a chill run through his spine at that exact moment. Then, on the monitor, beep. A pause. Beep. Strong, rhythmic, 60 beats per minute. Wilson let out a breath he felt he'd been holding since 1958. Chapter 10. The Sound of Silence. Recovery was not a straight line. It was a jagged path of fevers and fears. Clara woke up feeling heavy. There was a lump in her side. She touched it gingerly. "Don't press it," a nurse scolded. "Is it working?" Clara asked. "Listen," the nurse said. Clara lay still. She didn't feel the shocks anymore. She didn't feel the twitching. She just felt normal. The silence of the room was no longer terrifying because her own internal rhythm was filling it. But the psychological weight was heavy. She felt less human. She told Elias this one rainy afternoon. "I'm a cyborg," she said. "I'm not the girl you proposed to." "You're right," Elias said, taking her hand. "You're the girl who survived. That makes you better." Misdirection. The doctors thought the biggest risk was infection. The real risk was Clara's belief that she was a monster. It took Elias bringing in a stethoscope and letting her listen to his own heart, then hers, to show her they sounded the same. Chapter 11. The Bill. The surgery was a success, but the reality of 1,960 America crashed down. The hospital bill was astronomical. The Vances had nothing. Elias had his savings, but it was a drop in the bucket. The hospital administrator, a cold man named Mr. Henderson, called them in. "We cannot discharge her until a payment plan is arranged," Henderson said. "We can't pay this," Mr. Vance said, defeated. Elias stood up. "I'll work it off. I'll fix every ambulance you have. I'll scrub the floors." "That won't cover it, son," Henderson said. Then, the door opened. Marcus Thorne, the tycoon, walked in. He looked at Elias, then at the administrator. "I heard about the girl," Thorne said. "My son told me," he said. "The mechanic, the one who drove my Jaguar, was crying in the parking lot." "Son." Elias stiffened. "Put it on my ledger," Thorne said to Henderson. "Sir?" "The surgery, the device, all of it. Put it on my bill. Elias stared at the rich man. Why? Thorne looked at Elias, his arrogance softened by something unrecognizable. Because my son has a healthy heart and uses it to be a fool. Your girl has a broken heart and uses it to love a grease monkey. The world needs more of the latter. Contradiction of expectations. The antagonist became the savior, not out of kindness, but out of a recognition of value. Chapter 12. The Leak. 2 months later, Clara was home. She was walking, laughing, even baking poorly. The wedding was back on, but Wilson, Greatbatch, was worried. He had retrieved a device from a failed test in the lab and found moisture inside the epoxy. Body fluids were corrosive. If they got into the electronics, the pacemaker would accelerate. It wouldn't just stop, it would race. It would drive the heart into fibrillation. He drove to Elias's house in the middle of the night. "We need to check her," Wilson said, standing in the rain. "Is she in danger?" Elias asked, blocking the door. "Maybe. I need to listen to the rate." They went into the bedroom. Clara woke up, terrified to see the inventor hovering over her with a stopwatch. Wilson listened. Lub-dub, lub-dub. It was drifting. 62 beats per minute. Yesterday, it was 60. "The battery is losing stability," Wilson whispered to Elias in the hall. "The moisture is affecting the timing circuit. Do we take it out? If we take it out, she goes back to the block. If we leave it, it might race." "Fix it," Elias ordered. "You're the genius. Fix it." Wilson went back to his barn. He didn't sleep. He couldn't open the one inside Clara. He had to figure out a way to stabilize the circuit externally or determine exactly how long they had. He realized the drift was thermal. Clara had a slight fever from a cold. The temperature was affecting the transistor. "It's not a leak," Wilson realized. "It's heat." He called the doctor. "Treat the fever. The pacemaker is fine. It's just sensitive." It was a terrifying 24 hours. A contextual reevaluation where a simple cold became a life-threatening event because of the technology. Chapter 13. The Wedding. June 1960. The church in Clarence was full. Not just with family, but with the curious. The bionic bride, the papers had called her. Clara stood at the back of the church. Her dress hid the scar on her abdomen and the slight bulge of the device. Her father took her arm. "Ready?" "My heart is racing," she said. "Is it the machine?" he asked, panicked. "No, Daddy," she smiled. "It's me. It's just me." Elias stood at the altar. He looked handsome, though his hands still bore the stains of oil that no soap could remove. When he saw Clara, he didn't see a patient. He saw the victory of human will over biological failure. Wilson Greatbatch sat in the back pew. He wasn't religious, but as he watched Clara walk down the aisle, powered by his accidental invention, he felt a touch of the divine. He had reached into the chest of death and stolen a life back. Chapter 14. The Breakdown. Years passed. The device inside Clara was replaced, then replaced again as technology improved. Batteries lasted longer. Circuits became smaller. But the first breakdown wasn't the machine. It was the mind. One night, 5 years later, Clara woke up screaming. She tore at her nightgown, clawing at the scar. "Get it out! Get it out!" Elias held her wrists. "Clara, stop!" "It's not me," she sobbed. "I'm dead. I died in 1958. This thing is just animating a corpse." It was the survivor's guilt, the imposter syndrome of the saved. She felt she had cheated God and that God was coming to collect. Elias didn't argue with logic. He held her. He placed his hand over the device, feeling the steady, artificial thrum. "Listen to me," he said fiercely. "The machine is just a spark plug. You are the engine. You are the fuel. The spark plug is nothing without the gas. You are the life, Clara, not the box. He drove her to the lake. It was dawn. They sat on the hood of the car. Look at the sun, Elias said. A machine can't feel the warmth. Can you feel it? Yes, she whispered. Then you're alive. It was a deep psychological conflict, the struggle to integrate technology into the concept of the soul. Chapter 15. The beat goes on. Decades later. 1985. Wilson Greatbatch was an old man, celebrated, holding patents that changed the world. He walked through a cemetery in Clarence. He wasn't there for Clara. Clara was still alive, a grandmother now, baking terrible pies for her grandchildren. He was there for Elias. Elias had died of a stroke, a sudden natural event that no machine could predict. The mechanic who had fixed everything for everyone else had simply stopped. Clara stood by the grave, leaning on a cane. She saw Wilson. "Mr. Greatbatch," she said. Her voice was older, but the eyes were the same walnut brown. "Clara." Wilson nodded. "He always said you were the wizard," she said. "But he was the magic. You gave me the beat, but he gave me the reason to keep beating." Wilson looked at the headstone. He thought about that cold night in the barn, the wrong resistor, the accidental sound that sounded like a heart, the fun in accidents. "It wasn't an accident, Clara," Wilson said, looking at the gray sky. "I used to think it was. I grabbed the wrong part. But looking at you, looking at the life you had with him, I think I grabbed the only part that mattered." Clara placed a hand on her chest. Under the skin, a modern, sleek pacemaker hummed quietly, a distant descendant of the epoxy block. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me," Wilson smiled, turning to leave. "Thank the mistake." The wind blew through the cemetery, not cold like 1958, but carrying the scent of spring. The rhythm of the world continued, beat by beat, accident by accident, miracle by miracle.